chance of getting actually in trouble for it because the bot herder is not going to raise the stink legally. They may do other things, but they're not going to actually try to raise a legal stink. Sniffing there may actually violate it if that IRC box is also used for legitimate traffic. And that's also sniffing traffic, but chances are that the infected guy is not going to complain. But we have neutral 1 and 2. They're also on that IRC box. So they're talking. The researcher sniffs in, still violated the Wiretap Act, but because they've done it to a neutral who can go to the cops and say, look, this guy, and I don't care if he works for Carnegie Mellon, is sniffing my traffic. He's violated the law. Punish him. Now, this is something I've been curious about. Can you sniff a live infection? And I thought, if you can somehow sort out the packets to make sure that all you're doing is that as opposed to legitimate traffic, I think you might be okay. Okay. Issues of standing. This is, can criminals sue you? And chances are the answer is no, for reasons I've stated before. However, but innocent traffic, innocent users can complain, saying you had no right to do that. You're allowed to go, screw with the evildoers, but I'm not the evildoer. Evildoers. Okay. A big problem is that it's really kind of hard to determine if a site is truly, if you're sniffing traffic from it, are they legitimate or not? Because there are going to be sites that you can't tell. They're not going to have like a little flag like, hi, we're criminals. Okay, hypothetical. Researcher implements a honeynet, assumes all incoming and outgoing traffic is illicit, because there's nothing should be routed here that's legitimate. So the only stuff that's going to come in are people trying to attack it or misrouted traffic. Gets misrouted innocent traffic. For some reason, someone mistypes something. Are they going to get in trouble for sniffing those packets? I believe they're safe because they are a party to the transmission. The botnet, the person who's running the honeynet. Now, if they make the traffic content available, I think they're still safe because they were an intended recipient, even though it wasn't the actual intention. It was like they can say it was misrouted to us through no fault of our own, it was fault of the sender, we're safe. Inadvertent acquisition is not wiretapping. But you have to, it's affirmative defense. You raise that after you've been charged. So you have to basically say, yeah, we did all that, but. So if they don't buy your defense, well, now you're in trouble. The problem is that as a honeynet operator, you cannot use the provider defense because what service are you providing? You aren't using this to, well, I was using this to protect my network. You're running a honeynet. Like, what's to defend? You put those out there. You're like the National Geographic crew going, the goat has been staked. The puma is staring at it. We were protecting the goat. No, you weren't. You had film cameras to show that you weren't protecting the goat. I believe, though, what about consent? Receiver granted consent so the feds are okay, but a state, if they're a two-party state, can get interested. As an example, PA law is strange on this. All the parties have to agree in writing. I haven't actually seen this enforced yet, and it has to be verified by the AG. Like you send you can't do a private wiretap unless you get a terms of service that's signed. So PA-based ISPs will just generally, they'll put that in the terms of service, and by your using it, and they may send a copy to the terms of service to the AG. Okay. Defense. For everyone that's not doing research, you're just going, dude, we're getting hammered, what do we do to protect it? Passive monitoring, defenses. Basically, you hang out an IDS to figure out what's going on. Or say, example, you're instead of defending your own system, you're defending someone else's. You're a consultant. With the permission and within scope, that's important. You are allowed to sniff packets for a provider if you're an employee, if it is within the scope of your employment. This is important. If you are, and just because I'm an IT worker, is not good enough. It actually has to be explicitly in there. And it's best to have that in your implement. If you are running a sniffer, get it in there. I'm allowed to run a sniffer. This is when I'm allowed to run a sniffer. So that way, when you do run the sniffer, you are not violating 2511. You have that defense. If you discover a control server, say for example, one of your boxes has been compromised and someone is using it as an IRC server to run a botnet. I believe you're safe in intercepting that traffic because it's your box. You are the recipient of that data. Okay. Taking down disruption of an attacking botnet. Pulling the plug. If it's your box, you're allowed to. If it's on your network, you're allowed to. If you're an ISP and one of your customers' boxes is spewing packets, you are allowed to yank it. Null routing it, whatever. If it's yours, you have permission, and there's actual permission. Hey, Bob, your box is hosed. We're taking it offline. Thank you. Or constructive permission. Say, for example, you have it in the terms of service. If your box starts spewing crap, it's offline. DNS poisoning, the only thing that might get you there is if you, in your contract between the DNS hoster and whoever's being attacked, you may want to have some clause in there that says, we will do whatever we have to do to protect the systems. And you might want to explicitly write that in. I wouldn't, because then if the next generation we find out something else, you do some weird new magic with packet routing. One thing I want to talk about is macho response, because every time someone, usually after 4 or 5 drinks, will start, it's like, dude, no, we need to take it to them. And we'll build a bot army of white bots that will DDoS them. It's like, okay, one, put down the whiskey. Whiskey is the source of all sorts of good and bad ideas. Last night whiskey almost had us storing our motorcycles on this floor. Dr. Schomer was thinking, dude, if we're late, ride up the middle lane and just say traffic was off. I'm like, no, I'm sober. Give me some whiskey, that may happen. But for now, 10 in the morning, I should be sober. According to the terms of my probation. So the whole counterattack, and I've read papers written by lawyers about self-defense. I think the risk, if you do something really dumb and macho, like denial of service, if you figure out, look at the network map and go if I take that router out, I get a reprieve. And that router happens to be innocent, and you drop that and you take out other traffic. This is not, it's the same way as firearm self-defense. I was justified, right? And guess what? We're going to examine your life for the next 1.5 years, and that's not fun. No one has fun in court. Okay, people like me have fun in court, but there are 2 advantages. One, we're getting paid. Secondly, we go home. Okay, I want to kind of run through this Defender hypothetical. You're an end user, you're a sysadmin, a network admin, or IT security guy. You get unfriendly traffic from a botnet. You're actively monitoring it, and you get the upstream divider dude, all the traffic from this bank of IPs, drop it. Just drop it at the router. That's okay, I think. If you're an ISP, and you're routing traffic, you're noticing attack, either one of your boxes is compromised and spewing bad packets, or someone's attacking some of the boxes that are on your network. Actively monitoring the incoming, outgoing traffic, I think you're okay because you've got the provider thing. You've got the provider protection saying, I am using this to prevent fraud on my network, or to protect my assets. So, end user defender in this case, they have permission to monitor their own traffic. You can much more detailed, put that in employee contracts or those handbooks. If it's instead you're like a small ISP, or you don't have a direct contract with your end users, say for example you're a university. You might want to just have in the terms of service, by using our systems, we reserve the right to sniff packets to defend the network. Just so it's the belt and suspenders approach. You can't come to us, you have more protections than just what federal law allows. Okay. ISP Defender. You may have permission to monitor your own traffic on your networks because it's either in the terms of service or it's the prevent fraud clause in 2511. Dumping traffic. There's no federal law that prevents you from dumping traffic on your own network because it says you're not allowed to intercept it. It doesn't say you have to route it. Interception is I'm looking at it. If for example, this packet goes by, if I look at the contents, I'm committing a 2511 violation. If I look at it and go, I haven't read it, I haven't intercepted, I just dumped it, I'm safe. Okay, some dumb takeaways. Protect yourself, protect your organization. Have monitoring clauses in contracts with clients, end users, whoever else. And it's simple. You can just have this as one little clause in the big terms of service. By using us, we get to do this. Seek to avoid monitoring innocent traffic. I love writing one line that's so infinitely complex because, at least the last time I checked in TCP/IP or TCP, there is no flag for innocent, and I'm sure someone will eventually publish that, and it'll be April Fools. Actually, no. Didn't someone did write like the evil bit? I was thinking like that. Like let's activate that, and just ask that if you're a bot herder, you just evil bit equals 1. Thank you. That's great. And if that happens, it'll be perfectly safe because then you could monitor those. Routing metadata is less protected than the contents, so if you can figure out some way of sniffing just that, you're better protected. If you can figure out some metrics by which you can determine bad packets by doing that, you're in a safer place than you are if you actually have to do content analysis. And I'm also willing to bet that you have some advantages by just pulling the metadata, pulling the headers, you have less to analyze. So it's actually one of those, I can actually do this faster. So it might actually be both legally and technically easier. Of course, I'm not going to write that. I'm not that good of a coder. Stored communications are protected differently. I think that's less important for what most botnet defenders would deal with because you're not actually pulling, there aren't going to be that many stored emails on a box that you're hitting, but it may happen. The biggest takeaway is counterattacks are stupid. Don't get macho. It's because my biggest fear is like the guy who came to me 2 years ago and said I'm pissing off the Scots. Imagine if you counterattack. You do your counterattack against. I think this is a botnet. Instead, they either you make a mistake or they did something neat with IP spoofing, and you drop I don't know, Department of Defense website. On the list of bad things, that's on the top of them. You could inadvertently or stupidly really increase your problems. It's like firing wildly in a subway to defend yourself against a mugger. There may be easier ways of defending yourself that don't get you in more trouble than when you started. Wow. Any questions?
A second point, I'd give about imminent threat. So if your neighbor's house is on fire, you should be able to put it out. The fire's heading your way. Aren't botnets like the wildfires of the internet? And the third question is Good Samaritan laws and also how that would apply in this situation.
All three of those would be good defenses if you're charged with you've done something you shouldn't have. However, the problem is that no one's effectively raised those defenses. And one piece of advice is that's what we call precedent making, which sounds really cool. That means that you get to have your name in an opinion. That's bad. For one problem, half the time you'll lose in that. And according to the Bob doctrine, and while Bob got to spend obscene sums of money to get it up to the appellate courts to make it an opinion that will follow. You're right, that they are potential defenses. I think